afternoon and welcome back to the Guyana Extractives Industry Transparency Week. My name is Kitty Sabaslai. I will be your host for today's session, and it is my great pleasure to be live here with you and with our esteemed presenter, Miss Nicole Cole. He is the Commissioner of Women and Gender Equality Commission. And the topic for today's discussion is women's brave sojourn in male-dominated industries. But although women make up more than half of the global workforce, men still prevail in the extractive sector. For women, the extractive sector can provide opportunities for an improved life and hidden benefits. It is no secret that many companies in the extractive sector hire women to operate machinery, drive trucks, as it is noted that women have impressive safety records and equipment maintenance costs are dramatically reduced. Women-led business that feed into extractive sector supply chains can also thrive. Yet, despite this, women still face barriers in these male-dominated sectors. Overcoming these challenges require equitable access to education, participation, and decision-making. So please join me in welcoming Ms. Nicole Cole, the Commissioner of Women and Gender Equality Commission.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and I am very heartened to be here today and to participate in this very important forum, because as Guyana moves into what we call an oil producing nation, this industry, this latest or the newest extractive industry, will bring with it a lot of wealth, yes, but for whom? And where do women lie? How are the rights of women and children will be respected in this industry? Because in the extractive industries, we have children who work in that industry, even though it is a crime, a violation, child labor, it does occur. And we also have what we call women's brave sojourn. That's because in male-dominated industries, there is a culture that prevails, which is really to deter women's access to those critical resources that she needs to sustain herself and family. Here in Guyana, it is no secret that women like myself, we are predominantly females who head the household. I am a female in charge of my household. And because of that, where we venture to get monies, there can be many dangers there that lurk, to which my slides will actually authenticate. And so the next slide will actually show what happened in Guyana. So before our new oil giant, Exxon, which for me has more power than the Guyanese people with what it has been able to do, before they were able to operate here, they had to get what is called an oil production license. And here, this slide tells you that Exxon is set for oil production. And it tells you that there was reviews by the technical and environmental aspects of the LISA project development plan that was submitted by ESSO Exploration and Production Guyana Limited. It was done in 2017, and the government was expected to grant the license, which was granted. And so we know that production went ahead in the year 2020. So here we are. And the next slide will highlight what are the real challenges for women in this industry. So this is a very enlightening editorial by one of our leading newspapers, Stabrook News. And as it said, not to be countenanced. And it is telling you, it is highlighting what happened in the newspaper. They had a Women's Chronicles is a part of their news item. And then they had a headline titled Madness in Madia. Persons who are familiar with Guyana would know that Madia is a mining community in the region 8. And the woman is telling of her frightening and completely reprehensible experience of what happened to her in the Potaro Siparuni region. By her place of employment, this is her being employed. So she is saying that during her time there, she was sexually harassed verbally on more than one occasion, on more than 2 occasions, and physically at least twice by men in the town. The men who perpetrated the act, she said, were visibly intoxicated, although in at least one instance of the harassment occurred well before noon. And then she was singled out and targeted because she was a stranger. And rather, she reported witnessing many women and girls being subjected to the same disrespectful and lewd conduct. The editorial went on to say that associated with the mining of gold, this is where in the sector now we're looking at our mining sector. Gold, Guyana's gold is still valuable. It remains valuable on the world market, and it carries a wonderful price, especially when gold is kicking on the world market or it's up. Madia has long gained the reputation of being rough. However, over the years, it has been dragged toward propriety and having eventually donned the cloak of seeming normality. The tongue was officially declared. This is Guyana's 10th tongue in October 2018. So Madia is now a tongue. But then Madia is also a place where sexual violence and abuse of women and girls have become normalized. Sexual violence and abuse of women and girls can never be normal. It is a crime because all of our laws, locally as well as international instruments, speak to respecting women's rights and children's rights as human rights. So we are looking at a culture of alcoholism, and the editorial tells you that it's a public health issue that desperately needed to be addressed. And this is just over a year ago. This is January 2020. But the reports of this harassment, the brazen acts that are committed, they do it so wantonly because nobody does nothing. And this is where I take umbrage with that. The next slide will show more of what what I would have termed sexual harassment of women in male-dominated industries is a norm. And sexual harassment, though endemic in Guyana, is a global issue. We know that. We know the Me Too movement and what it has been able to do in the great United States of America in holding powerful men to account for their lewd behavior and the fact that they think it is okay to violate women's bodily rights. And what really compounds the problem here is that when they call you these names, hello beautiful and the cat calls, if you don't respond to them, what you actually get coming back is this heavily wanton abusive attack. So if they call me hello beautiful, how are you doing, black queen, or whatever they want to use, and I don't respond, Coming right after that will be the foulest language. Or I can have an approach that attempts to block my path. And I am not speaking in a vacuum. I would have sojourned to Barometer more than once. Barometer is a mining community. And later on in the presentation, you will see that it's highlighted for what has been going on there. And I'll share some of my experiences as a commission and our recommendations. I've ventured to, I've been to Port Kaituma. I've been to Matthews Ridge. So I've been in the, what you would call in the belly of the beast. And I would have experienced some of exactly what the women are talking to. But what makes the men back off when you actually say that I'm a social worker, I'm a welfare officer, plus I'm a constitutional commissioner, then all of a sudden they become very animated and they want to spark up a conversation other than sex with you, but it's really to deter you from what you're actually there to do. I like to read this bullet, but sexual harassment is also well established in workplaces. We know that. Despite there being policies against it in every practicality, every modern company in the world. For example, a recent study done in the US revealed that 1 in 18 women and 1 in 40 men have experienced sexual harassment in the workplace, perpetrated mainly by co-workers, clients, customers, and to a lesser extent, their bosses. And here I want to highlight a serious case that happened at the Chedi Jagan International Airport, whereby you had a boss sexually harassing what you would call a subordinate staff. And that's an ugly story. No justice. The next slide will highlight more of the same and why sexual harassment is a norm. Now, this statement may be controversial, but there is an implicit bias in patriarchy, which supports the sexual abuse of women. Who really benefits from the sex industry, the trafficking of women and children? It is supported by men with money, men who still make more money than women, men who are very powerful and will use that money to ensure they can exact that type of what they want. So I want her by anything I can pay for though, anything. And so they will bring the gold, they'll bring the money because they think, well, that this is a norm. Like rape, which is at the very end of the spectrum, sexual harassment has little to do with any morals and values men may or may not have included as part of their socialization, and much to do with power, disrespecting women through the use of denigrating comments is more than patriarchal, although that is a part of it. It is downright misogynic, objectifying women, refusing to hear their voices and seeing them as mere bodies, also lend to the disparagement which some men use as an assertion of power, as in, I am better than you, therefore I can do whatever I like to you. And this is the point really. How many women can negotiate sex when a man comes to demand that sex from them? And you say to them, look, I don't want to have it. I really don't want to have sex. I don't feel like it. Or if we're going to have this sex, I want you to wear a condom. How many women have that negotiating power? From my experiences as a welfare officer and as a constitutional human rights commissioner, very few. But there is hope. The Me Too movement, which exploded mostly in North America 2 years ago, unlike almost everything else, has not really managed to take off in this part of the world. We mean here in Guyana, but it is high time that it did. Necessary action should be taken so that women and girls are safe and respected, not only in Madia, but in every town and village of this country. Women's rights are human rights. The next slide will continue to show what happens to women and why we need to have the law. So there is a law. There is the 1997 Prevention of Discrimination Act. which actually defines sexual harassment as an unwanted conduct of a sexual nature in the workplace or in connection with the performance of work, which is threatened or imposed as a condition of employment or an employee, or which creates a hostile working environment for the employee. Again, it goes on to state any act of sexual harassment against an employee committed by an employer, managerial employee, or co-worker shall constitute unlawful discrimination based on sex within the meaning of Section 4 of this Act. And this is what it states. Now, having all of this since 1997 does little, does zilch to actually deter what happens to women and girls and boys too in this industry, because you also have boys who are trafficked and exploited in the mining sector. The next slide will continue to highlight some more.
Miss Cole, before we move on to the next slide, can we take up some questions?
Yes, certainly. If there are questions, I'd certainly like to answer them.
Yes, let's start. Does our draft local content policy say anything about employment of women-owned businesses or gender diversity in certain categories of jobs?
I will have to say that the jury is out on that question. Here is why. I remember that the University of Guyana had hosted a oil and gas forum, I think it was, and I was interacting with one of Guyana's renowned engineer, Mr. Charles Sires. And I was asking him about how more women can become involved within the sector. And I had a pushback. There was this angst there. How can we have more women involved? I kept at that question. I think the company at that time, Total Tech, was doing training, but you had a minuscule of women. If you had 20 men, perhaps you had 2, if not 1 female alone in the mix. So there was this idea about having a quota in that every company that comes, because this is how women got into politics. The politicians will tell you, from Jean Phillips Gay to Viola Burnham, all of the women who entered parliament, they will tell you that it's because of a quota system. But now in the 21st century, we are moving from quota to parity. We're talking about gender parity. So that the jury is still out, and that needs to be included. In any local content policy must have a clause that deals with women's right to work. Because if we look at SDG 8, which speaks about the right to decent work and economic growth, one of the 2030 goals, if we check the ILO convention and all of the other international instruments that we would have signed on to, as well as our local, CEDAW is in the Guyana's constitution, we will see that women have a right to be able to work anywhere in any industry without her bodily integrity being violated. Who gives a man a right to my body for him to want to tell me that he wants to have sex and he needs it, and he needs it now and that he can buy it? That is disrespectful, and that's dehumanizing my human rights. So that is a clause that needs to be added. The jury is still out on that question. It is not there. No one is looking after the interests of, to say, women as a part of what? We recently have a Women in Oil that has just been launched through Dr. Dawn Stewart and her colleagues. I think Miss Abigail Lunk, one of the America's youth leaders. She's now the president of that association, but much work needs to be done. I thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cole. Here is the next question. Are there evaluated programs that empower women in Guyana?
Yes, there are programs that empower women in Guyana, but most of them take on the general mundane things. Oh, they send you to do cake decorating. They send you to do cosmetics, how to make up your hair and how to look pretty. Really and truly, what we need for the oil and gas, for women to get involved, we need women to venture into welding. Welders are needed. Okay, we need to women have women really skilled in the technical field. Okay, because the cake Exxon don't want to hire any cake decorator or no cosmetologist. They want to have well persons who know how to if like how that part went bad recently and they had to send all the way overseas to fix it. Would it have been great if we had an engineer right here in Guyana that could have fixed it and we get the money? So yes, there are empowerment programs, but they need to go more technical. We need to have more women in STEM involved in the technical aspect. Just like you had Katherine Johnson at NASA that helped that craft go to the moon, we need more like that. I thank you.
Very, very true. Thank you, Ms. Gold. This is the last question before we move on to the second part of your presentation. Here we go. As part of our ongoing societal response, what can we do formally and intentionally to address this issue within the oil and gas context?
And I am assuming that the issue here, the person means sexual harassment and the sexual abuse of women.
I would think so.
Yes. What I did at the very forum that the University of Guyana was hosting, I was asking every company, and persons got a bit uncomfortable. That's fine. If I'm asking you, do you have sexual harassment policy as a part of your company? I wanted women to come on and say to me what have been their experience working within this male-dominated environment. And you could have told that some of them were a bit afraid. I will tell you why. You see, people are afraid to be fired. Well, me, I'm Rastafari. I live in the fire. You can fire me every day and I will love it. I am a diamond. So every time you put fire on me, I will come more refined and I'll come out better and shine more brightly. So how do we prevent what is going to, this culture of sexual violence and the sexual harassment? We need to have the policies, and the policies need to be enforced. So we cannot have the law on the books, as you see in the 1997 discrimination, prevention of discrimination. We need to now have Women and Gender Equality Commission is calling for a standalone sexual harassment legislation. Could be modeled after the CARICOM sexual harassment legislation, but we wanted to have teeth, because men only respond to things that have teeth. If you're not hitting them in their pockets, if they're not sanctioned very harshly, then they continue to treat whatever they are doing as a norm. And this is where the legislation needs to really have a teeth and to really strike men where we need it to be struck. We punish them in the pockets and we also take away their freedom, revoke their license. If you have a company that is engaging and you are found to be wantonly engaging in the sexual harassment of women, you are found to be trafficking in women and children, then you shouldn't have any more license to work in the extractive industries, because you are violating women and children's human rights. That is unacceptable. I thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cole. Now we are about almost halfway through the time we have for today, so let's continue with the presentation you prepared for us.
Sure. I wanted to highlight here that the International Labor Organization, they also have a fact sheet that tells you that sexual harassment may take two forms: a quid pro quo, when job benefits such as a pay rise, a promotion, or even continued employment. So you want to get to the next level? Well, you got to give me some. And as a prerequisite for you giving me a little sum, I'm gonna get you there. So in order for you to get there, you have to climb on it, ride it like a bicycle, do different things to it, become an acrobat. And so this is what this fact sheet is also saying. It's for the notes. And then we must remember that when such an environment is created, it affects your mental health. You are intimidated and it's humiliating. because you are at your lowest self-esteem. It further notes that behavior that qualifies as sexual harassment can be physical, such as physical violence, touching, unnecessary close proximity, verbal, such as comments and questions about appearance, sexual orientation, and nonverbal, such as whistling, sexually suggestive gestures, the display of sexual materials. You know, I was totally shocked and stunned when a dildo found its way in Guyana's parliament. I thought that was very traumatizing to us. I think the next slide will highlight some of what passes as the norm. So this is an article going all the way back to 2012. And this is highlighted. I must give kudos to the Guyana Women Minors Organization and the former minister, Simona Brooms and team. This is where it is highlighting women in Linden, our region 10, one of our towns. Those who are in dire needs of job are complaining about the sexual harassment by their employers. See how far back we have gone? We've traveled back in time, 2012. And the main concerns that would have been raised at the meeting with the Guyana Women Minors Organization was this very normalized behavior. The behavior whereby men think it is their right to violate women's bodies. The next slide will go on to show more of what is happening. And here is an experience, and this is reported. Again, I thank Stabrook News, which I've used predominantly in this presentation. And she is telling you how she wasn't afraid to give her name, but she's telling you what happened to her. And this is, you know, oh my, this big Canadian company, this big powerful company that damaged up our environment and never really paid for that environmental crime that has still left our environment reeling from that spill. She spoke about what happened to her. And here she was employed as a cook with the company. And you see what she's telling you? She was seen as being what? Fresh. And so what happened to her? She's telling you, she's complaining. She talked about the room in which they are, the close, cramped conditions under which women were made to sleep. And the fact that when they have to change their clothing, there is no door. And no door. And then she was uncomfortable with that. The next slide will show you some more of what she did. She resisted. She went to her supervisor and she said, look, I don't mean able with this. And he told her to tell she, look, in the bush, this is bush life. So what does he mean? Well, in the bush, sexual harassment and violence against normal. And she informed him it's not the first time she's cooking in the bush. And she's accustomed to it. And so this is where she became a target because she resisted against this system here of this violent, vile, patriarchal norm of taking women's bodies as their objects and want to do as they please. So she said, she told Stabrook News, I'm in desperate need for a job. I have 2 children, but I will not allow people to do me anything. There's where she's saying, look, you could keep your money and I will keep my honey and die with my dignity. There is a powerful calypso like that, which encourages women not to stoop and to degrade themselves to men's wiles and what they want to do. So she spoke out. The next slide will show more of what we deal with. Now we are coming, we went back to 2012, we've gone back to where we have now. They showed you that you actually had a inquiry held into the trafficking of persons in the mining communities. And this was under the former Minister of Natural Resources, Trotman. And there were certain findings that came out of that. And of course, there are statements attributed here to the minister who told you that the trafficking of young children in itself is bad. Yes, it is. It violates the human rights of women and children. And then we had the minister, one of the first portfolios that she would have served. This is Simona Brute. She would have represented the Ministry of Social Protection in that meeting. And so there has always been a push into having all of these atrocities addressed in the mining communities. The next slide will highlight more. Now, we are here in 2021, and we all know that when the United States of America comes out with their report, everybody jumps because we want to know which tier we're on. And so this editorial here is highlighting that the number of children being trafficked for forced labor and exploitation is increasing according to the UN Office for Drugs and Crime. And they give you their latest global report on TIP. And it was released and it shows you the data. You can go to the website to read more about it. But it is a criminal activity. Now, what surprised me is that Guyana gave no data, but there is data because this ugly phenomena is happening in Guyana. TIP is happening as we speak. The other slide will highlight more. And if there are questions, I am available. So sex trafficking in communities, in mining communities, and this is the US State Department report. And the US State Department report is very cogent. It tells you exactly what is happening. You know, even if Guyanese want to pretend that this thing is happening, when the United States of America hits us right between the eyes and hits us to the solar plexus when they come out to tell us these things, we must take note. And so this US State Department is telling us what is happening here in the report. The next slide will tell us more. Again, and the next slide, of course, it tells you that I've taken my information directly from this report. Now, I am happy that we are able to maintain this tier 1 ranking in efforts against human trafficking, because there was a time that we were at a certain tier and it had government officials back then scrambling because, you know, when America gets ready to take back the visa, people just really scurry. And so because those sanctions may have been coming, then we had lots of things happening. Now, we have this ranking, they said, for 4 consecutive years. The question now beckons, will we be able to keep this ranking? Will we be able to consistently sustain it? Because in order to do that, we have got to do certain things as it relates to what is required for you to maintain that ranking. So they're saying, according to report, the government of Guyana fully meets the minimum standards for the elimination of trafficking as it continued to demonstrate serious and sustained efforts during the year, hence its tier 1 ranking. We are awaiting the next report to see if we maintain this, and the next slide will show more.
Before we move on, you mentioned you are ready for some questions, and I got some questions for you, Ms. Cole. Here we go. What are the necessary steps to address sexism in the workplace in today's society?
We have got to continue to educate, educate, educate. Sexism is something over time, a learned behavior is reinforced by a conditioning. If we are able to keep what I would call CQI, continuous quality improvement, it's a term that is used in the medical field. That's because medicine is constantly doing clinical trials and looking to better improve medications, like how they are looking now to improve what we call antibiotics, because we are having antibiotic resistance, microbial and so on. So we have got to continue to educate. That's how we combat and we tackle every vile thing that can occur. Education is the key. So we have got to continue to educate and to educate younger, So we get our boys. You see, it is Frederick Douglass that says, it is better for you to try with the children than to try with the broke that men. Men are grown. Certain behaviors are already ingrained in them. Some of them may never want to change that lewd, messianic behavior. But the young boys, we can start in the schools. We can have it in our curriculum that helps to teach them to mutually respect women. My only child is a boy, and I teach him all the time. If there's music playing in my house that is disrespectful to women, we have a war. And if he doesn't turn it off, I turn it off. So we educate. We also agitate, and we can legislate. I thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cole. Now, the next question has a little bit more to it. So let me just read the response, and there's a question at the end. The Oil and Gas Governance Network produced a video while women and hinterland and rural residents need to know about opportunities in oil and gas, how to access information on training, education, and jobs. Ms. Cole, do you think something like this would be helpful towards gender equity?
To a point, here is my problem with such a video. When you produce such a video, you also need to balance it to say that within these industry, or where the girls and the women will venture for jobs, there's an assurance that we have systems in place to protect your human rights, and should that be violated, it will be punished condignly to the fullest extent. So this is where Exxon dropped the ball. I've been watching them. They dropped the ball, okay? Right there and then, because in producing that video, you also need to talk about women's rights, the responsibility that companies have to respect those rights, and what happens in the violation of those rights. Because this is where we have the disconnect. Men are committing the crimes and they're not being punished for those crimes. They have the monies to buy justice. And I say that with no apologies for my lived experience and what I know. They have persons in the palm of their hands because of the money and the wealth that they control. The industry, the extractive industries is still heavily male dominated, as much as Mr. Dennison said that they were women now going into the sector and so on. But he rightfully admitted yesterday that the women's welfare is where much work needed to be done. So even Mr. Dennison know that this thing is wrong. I thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cole. And just a point of clarification, this video, this participant reference was produced by Oil and Gas Governance Network. And here we go to the next question.
Thank you for that clarification.
Of course. Now the next question, Ms. Cole, you speak about problems women faced in the hinterlands areas in the gold and diamond fields. Ms. Cole, are you aware of similar problems in the oil sector?
I have heard the stories. I have not had anyone. You see, what makes a story becomes real is if someone will inbox me and talk to me directly. When you hear a rumor, you have to take it, yes, you've heard the story, but no one has come forward to substantiate it as yet, to say that this is happening. And I would love for that to happen, because we want to know. The Women and Gender Equality Commission actually invested in what we call sexual harassment boxes. Just outside of our office at Peter Rose and Naira Street, you have a box, and it was done to encourage, because we know it is so sensitive. It was done to encourage women, men, whoever was experiencing it, to speak out. We have such a box at the universities, at Tain and Turkine. We have it at the post office corporation, the main post office. We have such a box at the at the hospital, the Georgetown Public Hospital Complex. And you know something? When we went up to those boxes and when we looked inside, they put condoms in it. Not much of what we really want to have happen. We want persons to speak out. So I am willing to sit with the first person brave enough to speak up what was happening. But I want to say this to the forum. Remember, when you speak out, you risk being fired. As I said to you, I am constantly on the breadline because I'm fired for my voice. I am fired for daring to speak against wrongdoings. I was fired formally when I worked at the Camberville Health Center. You know, there's always this fire coming to Rasta. But I said to you, I live in the fire, so it's no problem. Bring the fire. Because when I arrive, I bring it too. I thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Cole. Thank you for bringing your passion. It is really, really admirable. Now, let's move on to the last part of your presentation, and I'm going to put on the next slide.
And so this slide tells you about the efforts that the government would have made to combat trafficking in persons. And we want to commend government action, and we pray that they continue to do such. I saw recently that there was a training for the TIP unit, and I also know that the IOM participated recently in an updated version of the legislation. The next slide will highlight more. Now, there were recommendations, of course. Every report that the United States government puts out, they always give recommendation. And so here what you have, and this is a real problem, to reduce delays in court proceedings. Now, if you live in the hinterland, for those of you who are unaware, you may only be able to access our court system 4 times a year. It may have gotten better now, all respect due to the Honorable Chancellor and Madam Chief Justice, those who work hard in the judicial sector. We recently had a court opened in Bartica, one of our towns, Region 7, with hope that it will bring better access to justice. How can you have a trial waiting for 3 months, all because you don't have enough magistrates, and the court only sits once in 3 months? That in itself is a human right violation. To ask the people in the hinterland, like if they belong, so what happened? Indigenous people is not people. They are people, and they deserve the same rights as those on the coastland. So the recommendations tells you what has happened there. They got to vigorously investigate and prosecute sex and labor trafficking cases under the TIP Act. And those who, the complicit public official, if I, Nicole Cole, as a social worker, is found taking bribe to duck any case, they got to punish me condignly, because I would have been abusing my position of trust as a public official. This is where you have to have, you said, sufficiently stringent sentences. The next recommendation went on to say the police officers and law enforcement officials who abuse vulnerable individuals and intimidate them. You have cases whereby victims in shelters are made to provide sexual services to those who should be protecting them. It is gross. There are times I can't eat. I lost my appetite because how these cases hit me in my solar plexus and just make me more traumatized. The next slide will speak of more. Now, this is where we have Dr. Vincent Adams, who once had, I think it was the EPA. He's telling you that oil and gas, here we have a breach. Now, who can make Exxon do anything in this country? Exxon get away with a steal. Look at that contract that was signed, and now you have no negotiations. Man, look, I wish I was the president, or I wish Forbes Borden was alive, because then Exxon would understand where real power lies in Guyana. The next slide will say more. So this is where now you have the faulty equipment. Now, if we had the technical capacity to remedy this, Exxon wouldn't have we to no ransom really, whereby this compressor got to go to foreign and then it come back and then it tell us but what? How they could only produce 30 barrels a day, all the different things. Again, Exxon is operating with too much of power in the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. I am Guyanese and I take umbrage to this. Next slide, please. Now, this is where we have our very good Miss Abigail Long. She would have started out a project since 2020 to try to empower women in this sector. And she is now the president for the Guyana Women in Oil alongside Dr. Dawn Stewart. So congrats to Abigail Long and what she continues to do. Again, we've got to continue to highlight that women's rights are human rights and they have a right to earn in every sector in Guyana, including the extractive industries, and have their bodily integrity respected. The next slide will highlight more. Now, this is where we have the UN committee is telling you how they are worried about what's happening here in Guyana. And CEDAW, which I alluded to earlier, is part of our constitution. We report to CEDAW, and you see what it is telling you? That the greenhouse gas emissions from the extraction of oil and gas could negatively impact women through environmental degradation. The next slide will tell you more of this phenomenon. Now you have here, this is, we want to talk about all these US-based, all the foreigners, some Guyanese, some non-Guyanese, who really come to tell us that, look, y'all got to put your house in order, you know, things to help build up, because what we find happening, the foreigners have more employment than Guyanese right now in Guyana. They are living larger. And, you know, it's as if we don't really matter. So he's saying that, look, we want you to have a Ministry of Employment and Training, METS, to help create a cadre of trained local personnel, right? And he is an associate professor of maths from the Medgar Evers College. And so he's telling you what is needed here. And I'm praying that the powers that be is listening. And instead of bailing up every minute we hear about a sojourn for a hotel, and I keep asking, is Guyana going into sex tourism? Why are we having all these hotels? We're not hearing more about colleges. We're not hearing about an institution set up to look at perhaps medical marijuana and the benefits of cannabis and how it can benefit health. The next slide will tell you more. And so this is where you have, this was really a violation. This here should cause any cease order to a company. Here you have, this president is telling you of this international organization that, look, the direct emissions from the 3 Stabroek projects equivalent to burning over 260,000 hectares of Guyana's forests. Now, how could that be? Our forest is a protected area. We thank, I think Prince Charles is the patron of Irokrama, one of our lovely area, that piece in the forest there. But then when a company does this, why are we asleep? There's no big hue and a cry about this. And this is a gross violation, just like the violation of mowing down the mangroves. How can that happen? It's an environmental crime. It is wrong. And I take umbrage as a Guyanese. The next slide will highlight more. Now, Guyana have international obligations this tells you what our international obligations are. And we have a case which has, there's a case in court right now by 2 of our counsels, an international lawyer, Ms. Janke and Mr. Ronald Burke Smith. I think they have taken Exxon to court And I'm looking at that case to see how it goes. The next slide will highlight more about it. Now, this really what you see here about this slide, this is activism. This is us as activists speaking out about sexual harassment. And the reason for me putting this in here is to show that you've got to continue to be active. This is actually the head of the Special Organized Crime Unit being accused of sexual harassment. And that is a crime. We have allegations against such senior persons. The next slide will also highlight this is again another letter following up on the allegation against the head of the Police Service Commission, to which sexual harassment has been brought against him also. So no one is spared. We have no favorites. If you are caught in violation, we have to tell you that you are wrong. And if you fire me, Rasta, I live in the fire. Thank you, but I will still tell you that you are wrong. Wrong is wrong and wrong cannot be right. So sexual harassment is a violation and it's a crime. The next slide will highlight a few more. This is where you would have had talking about Barometer. Now, Barometer, I would have traveled to Barometer twice as a commissioner on the rights of the child. And what I saw there shocked the living daylights out of me. I had what is called a culture shock. The rape is so rampant. The next slide will tell you about an experience of this is the former head of PAHO talking about what's happening. Can you believe it that people will go to try to help and they're told that they can't do nothing or else they will be killed? This committee, this community actually had a presidential task force set up. When I returned from Barometer, one of the recommendations was to ban the rum shops. Is to ban the sale of alcohol. I have seen some things that I will never forget. The children drinking alcohol openly and parents with children drinking alcohol openly. It is something that flout every norm of behavior in Barometer. It is wrong. So this particular behavior is what the former rep, Dr. William Adupro, was talking out, that what happened to the young girls. There it is, help me, help me. But nobody goes to the rescue because again, it's a male-dominated industry, and what they are doing to women, this crime is seen as a normal behavior. The next slide will highlight good. Now, this is where yesterday I could remember asking this question. It tells you about another, this smuggled gold and how Guyana is in danger of being blacklisted, having our gold blacklisted. I am hoping that we can rectify this, because if we continue to have Venezuela gold smuggled, we are going to have our dollar depreciate. It's going to impact our economy negatively. So these allegations and what is happening with this case, we have got to find a way. The next slide will highlight some more as I wind down on this presentation. And this is where I am telling you, SDG 8, women's right to decent work. We have a right to work without having to spread our legs for an income, and men must respect that right. We have a right to sit at an office, to weld, to do everything else. We have a right to decent work, and men must respect that right. SDG 8, SDG 5, SDG 1, they are all tied into what happens with women. When we look at poverty, the feminization of poverty, it is women who still are very poor, even though they are going to school. They are not making the money as their male counterparts, and we know it even happen in sports. We see the Lady Jags cry out here in Guyana. That's our female footballers, about their treatment and the denigration and the dehumanization of their human rights. So I want to tell you men, we have a right to work. We have a right to work without spreading our legs to do indecent work. It's a violation, and I take umbrage. The next slide will highlight more. Now, why it matters? Women's access to decent work and to incomes not only improves their agency over their own lives, but can also reduce poverty and maternal mortality and improve health, nutrition, educational outcomes for women and their families. Advancing women's equality to close existing economic and social gender gaps could boost the global GDP by 12 trillion or 11% by 2025 if every country matched their progress of the fastest improving country in their region. Gender equality in employment gives women more decision-making power, enhances family well-being. They will typically invest more income than men. Yes, for truth. As far as I get my money, I study what for buy for me son. You know, even though he grown, you know, and I give it a laugh, he also looks out for things from mommy on to know. National evidence from Brazil, China, India, South Africa, they show many things. So here you have labor rights of women. Women do twice as much as the unpaid work. We know that. And our work is never measured in the GNP, the gross national product, nor the GDP. But SDG 8 is promoting sustainable, inclusive, and sustainable growth, full and protective employment for all. And the next slide will show you that decent work, I think this is the final slide. Decent work is the key to the 2030 agenda for sustainable development. And ILO have it. Women have a right to work in the extractive industry without being subjected to the humiliation, the dehumanization, and the violation of their rights. It is time that we walk the talk. Guyana have the laws, and we want it to work. If there are women who are experiencing abuse right now within any of the industries, I invite you to call the Women and Gender Equalities Commission's helpline 640-2006 and tell me what you are experiencing, because as a constitutional commission, we are mandated to uphold and to promote women's rights as human rights. Again, I repeat that number, 640-2006, and you also have 231-5276. I thank you for having me. Now bring the fire.
Thank you so much, Ms. Cole, for this wonderful presentation, asking the questions, asking the hard questions, and making us take a look at questions that might not be the easiest, but we all need a voice that speaks up, and we are just honored to have you here as a speaker for today. And in closing, I would like to welcome our great audience to join us for the activities later today. At 2:30, after a quick break, we will resume with a panel discussion, Working Career Opportunities in the Extractive Sector. Right after that, at 4 o'clock, we have a mystery session. Come and join us and see what we have in store for you. And the last presentation today, starting at 5 o'clock, will be about extractives and open government. So thank you so much for all your questions. You've been a great audience. We hope that these presentations, including Ms. Cole's today, have been enlightening, have been beneficial and useful for you, and you gain something that you can take away with you after the conference is done. With that, I want to say thank you to Ms. Cole, and in a short break, we will continue with our next presentation, which is a panel discussion. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you, and God bless.